Dear Jack, it's time we talked about some of the things that you have been neglecting to learn on GeoGuessr. Now, if you're going to get 10 countries in a row, then you're going to need to learn these things, at least to some extent. And this one-on-one conversation will hopefully get us there at least part of the way. I'm going to take you through a bunch of maps which I've hand-selected. We're also going to go through some examples over on another tab here. And we're going to check out different aspects of GeoGuessr which you have neglected to learn up until now. Though I know many of these you already know to some extent. Okay, starting off with the driving direction. Now, before I even look and talk about this map over here, checking the driving direction in every round is a way to split the world in half. You know that, but sometimes you're a bit lazy. So let's lock in and check the driving direction every time we get the opportunity. The way the signs are set up can often give you a clue, also the Google car as well. So let us talk about which countries drive on the right and which on the left. In Europe, it's extremely simple. The entirety of mainland Europe drives on the right. There's no exceptions to this. You've only got the UK, Ireland, Malta, and Cyprus that drive on the left. South America, and basically the Americas, for all intents and purposes, drive on the right-hand side, with the US Virgin Islands actually driving left-hand side of the road, which is kind of interesting, Jack. Okay, over in Africa. This is where I think you're pretty solid, but we really want to make sure we have it locked in. The entirety of the southern and eastern part of Africa that has Street View drives on the left-hand side. So even though it's more to the right, it drives on the left. The exception to this is just Rwanda. But you know what? If you forget that, at least you remembered all the other ones. But yeah, it's just Rwanda that's the exception. Over in West Africa, they're all driving on the right. The Indian subcontinent, everything that used to be part of British India, drives on the left. Down here in Southeast Asia is the toughest part. Now, Japan is its own thing. You know how to recognize Japan, that's okay, but it drives on the left. Now, everything else follows this rule. Thailand is an interesting country. You need to remember that it drives on the left. Now, everything that touches Thailand and goes to the right of Thailand, so I'm talking Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and the Philippines, and Taiwan. They're all in line with Thailand to the right. They all drive on the right. They're to the right of Thailand. They drive on the right. Everything below Thailand drives on the left. Southeast Asia is by far the place where you need to learn the driving directions. The rest of the world's kind of easy. If you remember it like this, everything to the right directly of Thailand drives on the right. You know, you also got to remember that Hong Kong drives on the left. Okay, Jack. We're locked in. Let's look at some ways to actually tell the driving direction based on the Google car quickly. Okay, so over here, we have a United States round. Now, you can tell that this is the front of the Google car because it's kind of shaped like the bonnet here, Jack. And that will help you determine the driving direction, especially on bigger roads than this. Obviously, we can tell we're kind of slightly on the right with the front of the car here in the US, but it's not that easy on a road this thin. If you're on a bigger road, it's going to make it a lot easier. But this is just one of the variations of the Google car. This is the very common one outside of Europe that has the bonnet. So you're going to see that in Southeast Asia, or in Australia, and in the US. South America too. Okay, now let's talk about the European variant. You've already learnt this by this point. It is the back tab. So this is, instead of the front of the car, the bonnet, this is the back of the car, near where the brake light would be. Sometimes you can see the brake light. You shouldn't confuse this with a brake light. If you see this back tab and it's red, it's less trustworthy because it could be a brake light. But if you see it and it's blue, you know it's the back of the car. You know it's probably either Europe or South Africa. And yeah, as we can tell, we're driving on the right-hand side of the road here based on the back tab, which is very important. Otherwise, just commonly in Europe, the older coverage will just have some kind of antenna at the back of the car. That makes sense. You can also see the brake light here. It is the back of the car. Therefore, we are driving right. Very good stuff. And finally, just miscellaneously around the world, you're going to see a lot of cars that look like this. This is the brake light again. This is the back of the car. You're never really going to see a red light at the front of the car unless it's maybe somehow blurred out. Like there are parts of Russia where you can see the front of the car as red, like up here, for example. Give a quick example. This little bit of red is actually the front of the car. You can use common sense here, but you can't even see that it's a light. It's actually the bonnet. It's just very blurred. That's just an exception. Keep it in mind. Most times when you see red, it's going to be the back of the car, though. Almost every time, Jack. Okay, let's head through to the next map. These are the countries you should guess in and the countries you should not guess in. I think you actually know this pretty well, Jack. This is basically just a refresher to talk about where you shouldn't guess. Places you shouldn't guess yet: Paraguay, Venezuela, Morocco, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. What else? Myanmar. It's very rare to get Laos coverage. You can see it. Belarus, no. Moldova, no. Bosnia, no. It's coming soon. That's I think basically all the countries that you would probably be tempted to guess, but just keep in mind that they're not going to show up. And look where the coverage is. You can see that up in northern Canada, you're not really seeing much. For example, like Ontario and Quebec over here, basically no coverage in the top 2/3 of those provinces. Very good to know. Helps you get closer guesses. Same with Australia here. Just pay attention to where there's absolutely nothing happening. Okay, excellent. Next one here, the types of signs. Before I even show you this, I'm going to show you the two types of signs. So we have the UK and Ireland, because they use different ones. So the UK uses this kind of warning sign, which is, of course, the red border on the triangle. And Ireland uses the diamond sign made of yellow. Okay? Fairly simple. This is what we call like the diamond, the yellow diamond. Okay. The yellow diamond occurs in North America, South America. It also occurs in most of Southern Asia. Specifically, the countries that drive left tend to use the American style, the yellow diamonds. So we're talking Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. We're talking Japan as well, and of course Papua New Guinea. How could I forget? But yeah, this is very much worth knowing. This blue section down here, pretty much don't worry about that. It's pretty much the same as the red. So yeah, generally speaking, the whole of Eurasia outside of Southeast Asia will have the British style. Notable exceptions, Liberia, if it ever gets Street View, because they used to be, because it's founded out of America, essentially, it is using the American style. And Ireland, having a lot of American ties, also uses the American style. Fair enough? Simple enough? I think we're good. Okay, moving on, Jack, to the next map. This one is a map I created myself, just for you. Not necessarily, actually, but here we go. It is about the road lines. Okay. There are some excellent patterns to pull out here, so let's have a look. Yellow in the middle with white on the outside. This is the typical American style. Look at the countries that you go for this. Canada, US, Mexico, everything in North America uses the US style. Additionally, the whole north half of South America, uses it as well. The southern half of South America gets a bit tricky, where you often see white center lines in like Argentina and Uruguay, which is like more of a mixed and unreliable countries. And Chile uses the European style, which is all white road lines. Now pay attention to where else uses these all white road lines. It's pretty much the entirety of Europe, with the exception of Ireland, which does the yellow on the outside sometimes, with the exception of Norway, which actually puts yellow lines in the middle, which is quite interesting. And with the exception of Finland, which sometimes does its own thing. Yeah, don't worry too much about the purple countries, but all the rest of them you need to learn. Okay, Indian subcontinent, always always white in the middle, just same as Europe. Then we have Kenya and the surrounding countries. They use yellow in the middle as well, whereas West Africa uses the European style. And of course, we're coming to the yellow outer lines, which separates Australia and South Africa, and that is South Africa and also the Middle East, and as you've seen, also actually somehow Ireland. Okay, so that is pretty much what I wanted to say there. Did I get some examples? I think I did. Road lines. Here we have an example of Argentina where they use them mixed. So they'll have white and yellow in the middle with white on the outside. Mixed road lines. There are just some countries that are less trustworthy, but as I said, very good to at least know where the yellow ones are always going to be, and good to know about Norway as well. Okay, Jack, let us move forward to the next map, which is the stop signs. Now, stop signs are actually very useful. Alto happens in Central America, whereas pare happens in South America. Very much worth knowing. Very much worth knowing. You can really get yourself out of a pickle between North and South America with that, but there are a whole bunch of countries around the world that are actually useful as well. For example, Indonesia will say stop, Whereas for whatever reason, in Malaysia, they'll actually say berhenti. Okay? Thailand will use its own language, same with Cambodia. Over in Turkey, they say dur, whereas the rest of Europe actually says stop. Basically, yeah, every other country. In Israel, they just put a hand, interestingly enough. But yeah, most important is to learn Latin America, and of course Quebec, where they say arrête. Okay, moving onwards. Here we have license plates. This one is a little bit harder to remember, admittedly, but there is at least a nice general principle. And that is that everywhere that speaks English outside the UK, actually, every Anglosphere country has short license plates. That's Canada, US, Australia, and New Zealand all use really short license plates. Compare that to Europe, which pretty much entirely uses long license plates, apart from the front license plates in Italy and Switzerland. South America, once you get better, you will learn these, but it's worth noting that generally speaking, you're only going to see the longer license plates in the countries like Uruguay, Brazil, and Argentina, whereas mostly shorter license plates will be in the West Coast. It makes sense. They share an ocean with the US here. But yeah, just worth knowing that, it's only a few countries in the world where you're going to see those shorter license plates like you have in the US. So you can learn this as you see fitting. It's definitely less important than the last maps, but let's have a look at some quick examples here. So here is, of course, the typical US style. If we look here, it is a very short license plate. It kind of fits the US style vehicles, I would say. Here we are. Over in Brazil, they have longer license plates. Certainly not as long as European ones, but longer. They'll often have a blue strip on the top in Brazil, in Argentina as well. And then over in Europe, I just wanted to show off Italian plates, which are short at the front, as I said, with 2 strips. And then at the back, they're long, as a normal European license plate is. Okay, moving on. Sometimes in the US, you're going to see some cars without a front license plate. And generally speaking, the rear-only license plate states are in the South. If you want to actually go ahead and remember, it's all the states in the South except for California and Texas, and every state that touches Ohio, including Ohio these days, they changed the law, that use only rear plates, not front plates. So lacking front plates in the South, and the South, they love freedom. They're a bit more, what would you say? I don't know. They love freedom. They don't want to have to be restricted by putting a front license plate on their car. So it makes sense. Okay, moving on to the next map. It's the chevrons of Europe. This is definitely, I realize I'm kind of covering this, but this is definitely worth learning, especially, I would say, the gold and black countries. So if you could learn those, Portugal, Ireland, Iceland, Norway, and Finland use the gold and black variation, and that is going to be very commonly seen on turns in those countries. You can kind of contrast it to the UK, where you guys use the black and white. And generally speaking, the other pattern here is that Eastern Europe has a lot of these red and white arrows, whereas in Western Europe and Northern Europe, you don't really see that. Okay, Jack, moving on to the second last map here, it is the pedestrian crossing signs. Jack, pedestrian crossing signs, okay? It is very useful to know these. They show up a whole lot in Europe, except in the UK, apparently, for whatever reason. But you have this style in the Soviet Union. In the pink countries here, you have this, that's really a lavender color, I'm sorry. You have this 3 dashes on the bottom with the guy with the alien-shaped head. Let me show you exactly what that looks like inside the game here. Here he is. He is the alien-shaped head pedestrian crossing. It's not a perfect circle. It's kind of an oval shaped, and it will have 3 dashes. Normally in Europe, you're going to see 5, sometimes 4, sometimes more, but rarely ever 3. And so 3 is a clue for Russia and ex-Soviet Union countries, namely the ones in lavender, very much worth knowing. And I'm covering it up here, but there's one country that has the most dashes, and that is Spain, and Andorra, actually. And they will have 8 dashes. So if you see an exorbitant number of dashes, it could be Spain, namely 8 dashes, then it will be Spain. Switzerland also has a lot. They have 7. But that is easily the most. No country even has 6. So Switzerland Spain, if you remember that, the S connection, and a lot of dashes. And finally, there's some stuff about the Google cars here. Jack, if you've particularly enjoyed this video, try and soak in a little bit about the Google cars here. I'll have this presentation linked in the description so you and the viewers alike can check this out. But worth knowing that some countries will not have the back tab very often, for example, Belgium and Austria. And also these grayed out countries do not have updated Street View yet, so that you will not see the blue tab in them either. Okay, Jack, that is what I wanted to show you in this video. I hope this was helpful to you. If not, I'm going to be very disappointed. And my dear friend, I expect some high streaks very soon. All right, Jack, good night, and thank you.